The situation with electricity in Venezuela is dreadful. Appliances break down all the time. Whenever we manage to afford meat or chicken, we have to store it at our neighbors because our refrigerator has been broken for 2 years now. Repairing it is impossible. My husband is working fewer hours because at the store where he works, the power only comes on for a few hours.
In 2010, the Venezuelan electrical system collapsed. The causes range from the dismissal of qualified technical personnel to corruption and poor management by those who have been in charge of the electricity sector for the last 23 years. But this crisis did not appear suddenly. Rates were frozen in 2002. As a result, the private sector stopped investing in electrical networks. In 2008, there were 4 nationwide blackouts. In 2009, Hugo Chavez allocated $1,279 million, and a year later, declared an electrical emergency.
We have decided to create the ministry. We don't know what to call it yet. The Ministry of the Sector. Well, we will make the decree tonight. We are going to create the Ministry of Electric Power to deal directly and exclusively with the issue. That is one of the measures. That is not the solution by itself, but it will help a lot.
The causes of the Venezuelan electrical system. They are quite old. These can be divided into several phases. 1. Lack of fuel for the proper functioning of the thermoelectric plants. Lack of maintenance in thermoelectric and hydroelectric plants. Precisely due to a lack of an appropriate salary and wage policy in the country's electricity sector, be it Corpoelec. There has been an exodus of personnel to other countries because professionals are looking for better salary conditions for their families. This directly affects maintenance. For example, the Cubans were the ones who came up with the idea of bringing distributed generation machines to Venezuela, scattered throughout the country, these simple, small, low-capacity machines. And today Venezuela is a graveyard of scrap of this type of machine. Is an example of how Cuban personnel are managed and developed in Venezuela. Currently, there are no financial resources in Venezuela to undertake the tasks of maintenance and production of fossil fuel, of fuel for our thermoelectric sector. We have major failures. We have a transmission line of 765,000 volts. Only 5 countries in the world transmit this level of tension. We should call upon Venezuelan engineering, the Engineering Academy, and the Engineers College to have everyone participate in solving this crisis. We need the involvement of the private sector, both national and international, to jointly tackle the task of restoring electrical service, prefabbing fuels, and initiating an appropriate energy policy that will serve us in the long term. The Engineers College has already proposed to the country a shift in the energy matrix where alternative energy is incorporated, and a planned replacement of fossil fuels in the national thermoelectric system. Caracas is being powered from various plants. In other places like Maracaibo, in Zulia, they are at the end of the system. It comes from Gori, crosses the bridge over the lake, and there have been problems that date back to when I was in the country 4 or 3 years ago. The Zulia thermoelectric power plants, the Ramon Laguna, the Rafael Urdaneta, and the Termazulia do not provide energy to that region due to a lack of maintenance and fuel. The case of the Andes, which is also at the end of the electric system, is more severe because there are entirely shut down hydroelectric plants. There's the case of Voltosa and Jose Antonio Paez. These are very strong, very vigorous hydroelectric plants. Some hydroelectric plants need more maintenance, like Don Luis Zambrano.
Since 2011, there was a coming and going of personalities of the regime in the Ministry of Electric Power. Rodolfo Navarro was in office for 8 months, while Joaquin Osorio was president of Corpoelec for just 7 days. Ali Rodriguez Araque returned on November 3rd of that same year to the ministry and also assumed the presidency of Corpoelec, but this time he was only there for 3 months. Then came the brother of Hugo Chavez, Argeni Chavez, who was in both offices for 7 brief days from July 23 to 30, 2011, and then became Deputy Minister of Electric Development. In 2012, he extended the validity of several contracts with the company Turbocar, to the detriment of the public treasury. Corpoelec workers point to him as causing losses of $4.5 billion intended for the improvement of the electrical system. In addition, Argeni Chavez signed documents for more than $226 million for the Tocoma Dam, whose construction began in 2003, and we will talk about it later. In 2012, electrical engineer Hector Navarro assumed the Ministry of Electric Power. A year later, he was removed from office after reporting irregularities in the government's management. In April 2013, Jesse Chacon, a Venezuelan military man, assumed the presidency of Corpoelec and the Ministry of Electric Power. He promised to solve the crisis in the sector in 100 days or otherwise he would resign. But neither of the two things happened. He did not solve the crisis and he did not resign either.
Starting from the moment I took over, we are consciously assembling a plan that we will notify to the Venezuelans week by week, and he will be able to evaluate whether we are doing it or not, as I do believe in efficiency or nothing. If in 100 days, since we present the plan, we do not achieve what we are predicting there, this man, who is here, submits his resignation and gives way to a Venezuelan who can do it better than me.
In 2015, Luis Mata Dominguez assumed both administrations. His greatest achievement was to restrict electricity consumption by 4 hours a day in shopping centers and residential areas. After 4 years and severe blackouts recorded in March 2019, Mata Dominguez was dismissed by Nicolas Maduro. In April 2019, Maduro appointed engineer Igor Jose Gavidia Leon, who a year later was replaced by the Army General Ernesto Reverol, who is still in office. The electricity crisis in Venezuela has not only resulted in economic losses and material damage. Hospitals and clinics, especially in the western part of the country, have been forced to operate in the dark. The National Hospital Survey indicates that in 2022, the country's public health centers spent up to 4 hours a week without electricity.
On August 15th of that same year, while my mom was connected to the dialysis machine, the power went out. The doctors treated her in emergency. They connected her to a respirator, but due to lack of fuel, the plant also turned off. My mom died.
Since the massive blackout that occurred in March 2019, 223 people have died in Venezuela due to electrical failures, according to the National Hospital Survey. The country paid for the corruption. Justice in cases of corruption regarding the Venezuelan electrical system has only been carried out outside of the country. For instance, Spain's anti-corruption prosecutor's office filed a lawsuit against the directors of the Duro Felguera business group for international corruption offenses and money laundering tied to public funds from Venezuela. Duro Felguera was charged with payments of $105 million made to the former Deputy Minister of Energy, Neris Villalobos, so he would use his influence to benefit the company in 2009. On June 26, 2019, U.S. Justice filed charges against Luis Mata Dominguez for conspiracy and money laundering, after Jesus Ramon Veros and Luis Alberto Chacin Haddad, Venezuelan businessmen detained in the United States, pleaded guilty to bribing employees of the Venezuelan electric sector under the approval of Mata Dominguez, who along with Eustaquio Lugo Gomez, participated in a corruption scheme through Florida banks, granting 3 companies, based in that state, more than $60 million in contracts, with Corpo Elec in exchange for bribes. Veros and Chacin Haddad were sentenced to 51 months in prison, and were pointed out as frontmen for Luis Mata Dominguez. In their statement, they claimed that they had sent 500 transformers to Corpo Elec, but they were only compatible with electrical systems in Cuba and Nicaragua. They also purchased 40 forklifts in the United Arab Emirates, which they sold to Corpo Elec with a 300% markup. The irregular business of Veros and his partner Chacin Haddad allowed them to obtain at least $20 million through 11 contracts with the Ministry of Electric Energy and Corpo Elec. In 2021, the United States announced a reward of $5 million for anyone who provides information leading to the capture of Luis Mata Dominguez and the former Venezuelan Deputy Minister of Finance, Eustaquio José Lugo Gomez. According to an investigation by Transparencia Venezuela, Javier Alvarado Ochoa, who was Deputy Minister of Electricity and President of the Electricidad de Caracas in 2010, was included among the 28 processed by a court in Andorra for money laundering. According to the investigation, Alvarado managed €46 million through the private banking of Andorra. In 2019, the Maduro regime announced the arrest of 5 people linked to alleged cybernetic, electromagnetic, and physical sabotages. Julio Cesar Acuña Núñez, Ramon Oswaldo Garcia Garcia, Miguel Angel José Freitas, and Otanil Ramon Sanchez. Of the 5, only Sanchez, who was an engineer of the extinct Delca, was charged for an alleged attack against the national electrical system. The Maduro regime requested Interpol to capture the other 4.
Here is Otonil Ramon Sanchez, identity card 10.475. 347. He was an operations engineer assigned to the Technology Directorate of the extinct Delca and is directly involved.
The most expensive electricity bill in the history of Venezuela, it's overdue. It's time to talk about the Tocoma Dam. Imagine getting an electricity bill for $15 billion. More than one Venezuelan would be left stunned, and the worst part is that we never received that service. Well, that bill exists and, even worse, without realizing it, we've been paying it for the last 20 years. It's called the Tocoma Dam. Here's the first part of the bill. It all started with a dream, called the Manuel PR hydroelectric plant, which started to be implemented in 2003, with a total budget of $3,061 million. Second part of the electricity bill. 2 years later, the Coroni electrification company Delca, now Corpo Elec, agreed with the OIV consortium composed of 3 companies, the Brazilian company Odebrecht, with 50%, the Italian, Impregilo with 40%, and the Venezuelan Winkler, with 10% to carry out the project. 8 years later, after facing supposed delays in the delivery of materials for its construction, the then Minister of Electric Energy, Jesse Chacon, requested an extension of the budget to $7 billion. This is the third part of the bill. Later, Luis Mata Dominguez, when he assumed the Ministry of Electric Power, requested a new budget to reach $9,365 million. Fourth part of the bill. The project included the installation of 2,300 megawatts to generate an average annual energy of 12,100 gigawatts per hour. 10 Kaplan generating units, of 230 megawatts manufactured by the Argentine company IMPSA, who only managed to install 2. The other 8 turbines are still in Argentina since June 2019. It was believed that the project would begin to operate between 2012 and 2014, although to this day they have not started operations and have not contributed any megawatts to the national electricity system, despite the great electricity deficit in the country and the long rationing in Venezuela. The construction of the dam is only 87.19% complete and is at a standstill. As if that weren't enough, 12.2% of the general state budget, which is 13,800,000,000 bolivars, will be allocated to the electricity sector in 2023. We wonder, will part of this money be used to reactivate the construction of the Tocoma Dam? On August 5, 2022, Nicolas Maduro said in a public speech that before the end of the year, Venezuelan public services would be recovered. However, the deep crisis of the Venezuelan electrical system, evidenced for more than 2 decades, continues. What can be done to change the reality of the Venezuelan electrical system?
From March 20, 2020 until today, we have received in the platform Monitor Ciudadano about 8,772 reports of power outages in the country. This demonstrates the severity and fragility of our national electrical system. But what hurts the most is that all this translates into unproductive hours. Every time there is a blackout in the country, there are hours that children or adolescents spend without being able to study. These are hours that workers spend without being able to work, of course, industries without being able to produce. And these are hours that merchants spend without being able to sell. If you have to spend hours without being able to study, obviously. And that's not to mention what can happen if a hospital or any clinic is without electricity. Some have been able to have backup generators, others, even though they have them, are not operational. But the truth is, for most people, if the electricity goes out, they can't work. And this can cost lives. We have seen various reports from the 2019 blackout. We have also seen others in different parts of the country at different times. So, all this issue of having problems with electricity, having blackouts, is a problem that can damage the future, or even threaten the lives of the citizens of our country.
The tremendous thermoelectric plant, Termo Carabobo, is today marking the first year of the revolutionary government. We're in the great electrical mission.
Only in 2022, according to the Committee of those affected by the blackouts, the country experienced a 22% increase compared to 2021, documenting at least 233,298 service interruptions last year. The most affected states continue to be Zulia, Táchira, Carabobo, and Mérida. But the truth is, no one is spared.
They want to impose a Pinochet on Venezuela. Almost 40%.
No one is spared.